Tourette syndrome is a disability, and the tics you've heard tonight are involuntary, which means the person who has Tourette syndrome has no control over their language. We apologise if you were offended. Hurly-burly world flings at us for just a few moments, and yes, everything's going to be okay. Please welcome two legends, Delroy, Lindo, and Michael B. Jordan.
Delroy and I are delighted to be presenting the first BAFTA of the night for a vital part of movie making.
We're here to celebrate the...
It's so interesting that a movie that is essentially advocating greater awareness and understanding about Tourette's is at the heart of a controversy. This is the Last Picture Show with Rahim Khan, and I am reviewing I Swear. Now, I rarely make mistakes when it comes to movies, because the thing is that I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I generally have a sense or a feeling, and sort of one look at a film's poster and I'm like, you know what, this one isn't for me. And I remember, this is around November last year, I saw the poster for I Swear. And I was like, am I interested in this movie? Not at all. And I think that was in large part due to its leading man, Robert Arameo, who, and the reason why why I didn't like this guy, past tense, is because he played Elrond in The Rings of Power. I think that's a whole other show that I'm going to do, but there's just something about him. Sure, he played a young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, but something about his performance as Elrond, in fact, about that entire show just put me off. And I was like, you know what, I'm not interested in this. Then I learned that, I saw that many critics were putting it on their top 10 list. And I was like, what for? What is this movie even about? And then I sort of saw that it is about John Davidson, a Scots who has Tourette syndrome, and over the course of his life, he's in his 50s now, has been an advocate, a teacher, somebody who has tried to educate the public about this particular affliction. What's it called? He is, of course, a recipient of the OBE, the Order of the British Empire. Now, again, that alone wasn't enough for me to want to watch this movie. Because the thing is that often when you have movies about people, dealing with their sort of disabilities or handicaps or any such thing, I mean, they tend to follow this very sort of cliche, stereotypical line. And I don't know, again, reservations. But I mean, like, there were like comments. There was this one reviewer who said that sort of, I haven't laughed this hard or cried this hard in years. I'm like, okay, let's give this one a shot. And again, I rarely make mistakes on this. I have a very good nose for film, but this was a movie that I shouldn't have excluded from watching last year, because yes, it's this wonderful, delightful. I mean, sort of all of these words that end with full, these adjectives. Because the thing is that yes, it is about this man, a boy. The movie starts off, here's a teenager who is suddenly sort of like, a bolt from blue, hit by this syndrome, which as yet, well, of course, it had been diagnosed, it had sort of been identified. But I mean, a lot of people and by establishment, I mean sort of the education establishment, the the medical world was still sort of trying to understand it. And I mean, sort of that understanding is something that both he, his family, and sort of everyone around him over the course of this movie have to come to terms with and sort of have to just sort of deal with. It's interesting, almost ironic, that the movie opens up on his receipt of the OBE, because there he is wearing his kilt, dressed in fine Scottish splendor. And sort of like, he has nerves. He has butterflies in his stomach almost. He says, they can just mail it to me. Because again, I mean, sort of like, Tourette's being Tourette's, um, it's you don't know what to expect. And sort of as he enters the hall, and there's the Queen of England, he's he says, "Fuck the Queen," you know. And what's ironic is that this same outburst, this same thing that plagued this man throughout his entire life. I mean, there's this one point in the movie when sort of, it's a high point for them. I mean, for him and his adoptive family. Um, he goes out to get Chinese, and sort of on the way back, he sees a lady, dressed in a miniskirt or something like that, whatever the fashions were back in the 80s, 90s. And he calls her, I think, a slag or a cunt or something like that. And again, it's Tourette, but the lady is offended, so much so that she calls her mate, and they beat him within an inch of his life. We now have this other real world scenario in which there John Davidson is at the BAFTAs. Because the thing is that I'll get to my review in a second. The movie, while snubbed by the Oscars, because the thing is that I had mentioned earlier on, or at least at the start of this review, that I didn't much like its lead actor. Of course, I take those words back because it is a fantastic performance. I mean, this guy is such a revelation. After that low point of Elrond in the One Ring, he just comes as this. I mean, it's fantastic. It's a really, really good performance. So, I mean, snubbed by, of course, the Oscars, but the best BAFTAs did nominate him for Best Actor. And of course, I would say rightfully so, considering that he was up against people like, DiCaprio and Ethan Hawke for like Blue Moon and One Battle After Another, respectively. I mean, he won. He took the award on the night. So good for him. But there, and then I'm coming to the controversy part. There you have Four Sinners, Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo. They're up on stage. And of course, there's silence. They're waiting for them to announce whatever they have to announce. And sort of in that silence, you hear somebody shout out the N word. And of course, it's John Davidson and his Tourette's. Now, of course, this has caused quite a shitstorm because the thing is that while the BAFTAs cut out, while the BBC cut out, what's it called, the acceptance speech of a Nigerian filmmaker who, of course, he speaks about what's going on in Sudan, what's happening what happened is happening in Gaza, and of course ends by saying "Free Palestine." They cut that out. They did, of course, leave this bit in, because I don't think it was live, or maybe it was. I'm not sure, but I think there's that delay, right, where they have a chance to cut out the feed. So he does set it. Now, the controversy. Because the thing is that people in the world, Jamie Foxx took to Instagram, took to sort of social media, and of course is saying that of all of the possible words that this individual could have said, why did he say the N word? Or stuff to that effect. I've, of course, put it up here. Um, I'm no expert on the matter, but I think that this is the reason why this movie exists. Because again, over the course of what, like an hour 40 or minutes or something like that. I mean, while it's not sort of like, documentary where it's sort of educational in its thing. I mean, where it sort of explains the neuroscience behind this and sort of what Tourette's is and how it works. I mean, you get a pretty good idea. I mean, you all remember that show Boston Legal with David Spader and what's it called? William Shatner. Um, you then had that one character in it. I'm forgetting, his name. He'll of course appear here. He had Tourette's in that show. And the thing is that while it's often, I wouldn't even say used for comedy relief, or even dismissed as that. I mean, the thing is that um, John Davidson, and the reason why he was even sort of awarded the OBE is that this is somebody who has been in the limelight, maybe not, for example, in the Americas or even Europe, but at least in England. I mean, they very early on in his life, I think, sort of in his maybe teens or young adulthood, made a documentary on him. John's Not Mad, I think that was the one, in which sort of like, they go to explain that sort of like, what he has is real, is genuine. There is no sort of impulse control, or there is no, what's it called, sort of barrier or bar from what this guy says or does. It is an actual genuine thing. This is, of course, not to mean that he is not sort of apologetic or cognizant or aware of, sort of what he's saying or doing. But I mean, the nature of this very thing means that sort of it just comes out. And unfortunately, it tends to be the right thing to say. Not the right thing to say, but the most sort of appropriate thing. Like, for example, there's a scene in the movie where, unfortunately, the advent of his disease, of this syndrome, causes his family to split up. His mother reacts to it, even though she's a nurse, in a very different way. And I mean, he's almost like sort of treated like a leper. Now into sort of young adulthood, I think he's almost like, I mean, in his 20s, he meet he reconnects with an old childhood friend and meets his mother, Dottie, who herself was a nurse um, and dealt with mental health patients. And she herself has cancer. And in the very first moments of their meeting, he says, "You're going to die," you know? And I mean, that actually happened. I mean, sort of in meeting Prince, now of course King Charles, he says fucking parasite. These are just things that, again, I mean, sort of it's these moments in the movie that sort of really make you laugh. I mean, then sort of that struggle, and this is where I think his award is very deserving because of God, it is something that I can't imagine living with. I mean, I can't imagine living with something that is so, forget socially awkward, is almost debilitating, where I think, and I can't say this as a statistic or as a fact, but I'm sure people who do have it may not want to sort of go out in the wide world and sort of like, live a normal life because of, sort of the stigma, if you will, or at least, the Jamie Foxxes of this world reacting. Of course, I'm not saying Jamie Foxx is wrong. I mean, sort of any use of the N word, I mean, sort of on such a public forum, um, would invite immediate censure and condemnation. But in this case, there is, of course, that sort of qualifier that guy does have Tourette. The very reason he was there in the audience is because this movie exists to again tell his life story and tell this struggle. So yeah, it's it's really interesting that even after, of course, this film is released and this man has sort of like, lived his life with all of these little sort of anecdotal moments, there is still more. The movie, of course, is written and directed by Kirk Jones. And what I liked about it the most, of course, besides, of course, his now BAFTA winning performance, is that, again, I'm often very chary of these movies because the thing is that, again, they so often are so cliche in dealing with this thing because, it's about how in that typical sort of like, screenplay, the character is diagnosed with this sort of life-threatening, sort of like, life-changing disease or handicap or something like that. And first they go through sort of like, those stages of depression, but then they eventually come to terms with it and they overcome it and then they sort of rise to the occasion. That is it. And not to say that this movie does not follow that same sort of pattern, but I think that it's told with a wit. It's told with uh, it's a lot less sort of saccharine or sort of sentimental. There's a winning quality about it. And Arameo, who, I mean, his stocks have most definitely risen in my books because this guy is so good. I mean, first of all, this is somebody who has to make his Tourette's believable, I mean, he has to sort of communicate to audiences that what he has is as close to what that man's sort of actual life is. It's just amazing. And he was really, really, really good in it. And I'm so glad that he won the BAFTA for it. Um, and I had no idea that he had gone to Juilliard. So that means he's definitely a talented guy. And then, of course, you have this. So, yeah, you can see the clip. I'm even going to add it in this review, making the rounds. It's just one of those things.